States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hey, B. Colors. Right. Hey. Forward. Arms. Forward. Right.
Guys, come back in here. At least 10%, nothing less.
Colonel, can you have him go behind the mic?
Come behind the mic, guys. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. Tell them your name, what school you're from, how long you've been junior ROTC, what grade you're in.
I am Cadet Technical Sergeant Lemon. I am from North High. I'm a sophomore, and I'm a second year in ROTC.
I'm Parker Liedel. I go to Fargo South. This is my third year in ROTC, and I am a junior.
My name is Nicholas Borowski. I am a Master Sergeant in the program, and I am a sophomore at Davies High School.
I'm Justice Johnson. I am a major. It's my third year in the program, and I am a junior at Fargo South.
I'm Devin Keith. I'm a junior at Davies, and this is my third year in the program.
What questions do you have for them?
Oh, boy. Well, thank you, first of all. That was a wonderful way to kick off our saying of the Pledge of Allegiance at every board meeting. Colonel Muse, I asked you when we started that this didn't used to be district-wide. Is that true? When did that change?
The program has started out at North High School. I mean, back in 1969, they actually had a program at South and a program at North. After the first year, South stood down and it just had one program at North. It was at North for about 40 years. And then when the whole Davies thing came up, they decided to move it to South to centralize it. Partly because there wasn't enough room at North anymore for the program. And so for about 2 years, we moved to Agassiz. And we were at Agassiz for 2 years with the freshman academy while Davies was being built. And when Davies was finished, we moved to South High School, so we were centrally located across the district. We are probably one of the top first 50 units in the country. So there's over 800 junior ROTC programs in the country. We were one of the first 100 units. So we've been around for over 50 years. It's always been a district-wide program. We're located at South High School, and everything's taught at South High School, and the students come to us. So, and we also currently have some students from West Fargo in our program. We've had students from Park Christian over in Moorhead. We've also had students from Oak Grove in the program. So over the years, we've had pretty much anybody in the local area has been part of the program. I know Dr. Gandhi Moorhead has reached out to Dr. Gandhi last year about having their students coming over to the program. That's something that we're looking at next year of potentially Moorhead becoming part of our program also. So right now we have about 66 cadets in the program. Next year we already have 97 registered for next year. So that's kind of a synopsis of the program. So we're a we say district-wide program. We're not just Fargo South. We're not the Bruins. We're not the Eagles. We're not the Spartans. We're the Raptors. So we kind of are across in the Raptors. The F-22 Raptor is the premier fighter in the Air Force right now. So our mascot is the Raptor.
Nice. I see Dr. Gandhi has a comment.
Yeah, just a comment and a question. Board members, as you know, the state of North Dakota has recently transitioned from how we assess student success. As they finished their K-12 career, we've moved more towards the standard of what we call choice ready, making sure that our students are workforce, higher ed, or military ready as well. Colonel Muse's program is one of the premier programs in the state, and he's recently had to work with our state to advocate for making sure that this program is actually going to be reflected as a choice-ready indicator for our students, which hasn't been in the past. And I know we've talked about some of the concerns with the methodology of calculating choice-ready in the past, but it's something that we really look forward to because we know the value of this program. And Colonel Muse, if you have a couple of minutes, just maybe talking about what that's going to look like moving forward and how that will make an impact for your students as they graduate.
Right now, there's about 4 or 5 criteria to be military ready in the Choice Ready program. One is PE courses. You can't have any suspensions in school. You have to get a certain score on the ASVAB test, the Armed Forces Vocational Aptitude Battery. And then you have to meet 2 of the other areas on the Choice Ready chart. What we are recommending, and we were supposed to have a meeting today, which was canceled because of weather. I met with the subcommittee, I think last week, briefed them on my proposal to add junior ROTC into the Choice Ready program. They unanimously agreed to take it forward to the big committee, which was supposed to happen today. It's now rescheduled till the 12th of May, I believe. But we don't want to penalize those schools that don't have a junior ROTC program. We only have 4 in the state. Can anybody tell me where they're at? Anybody know where the other 3 programs are? We have one here. Where are the other programs at? Minot has an Air Force one, so we have 2 Air Force and 2 Army. Where's the Army ones at? Any idea? No, Bismarck has no program. Grand Forks has one, and the last one is in Devil's Lake. There used to be one in West Fargo. 5 years ago, they shut their program down, but there's only 4 programs in the state. And so we don't want to penalize those schools that don't have junior ROTC, but we want to give our students the opportunity to use their time in junior ROTC to help qualify them for the military choice ready. So that's our proposal, is instead of having 2 of the other criteria, is either that or have 2 years in junior ROTC, and so they can substitute that for the other part of the criteria to be military ready for the choice ready program. So I think it'll be a win-win for everybody. It won't penalize those students that don't have junior ROTC, but allow those schools that have junior ROTC to use that towards making their military choice ready. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. One other thing I want to say is the perception out there is that we're here to recruit these young men and women to join the military, and that is farthest from the choice from what we do. Our mission is to create better citizens for America. We do not recruit our students. There's over 800,000 students in junior ROTC across all the services, and again, it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines have junior ROTC units, and less than 10% of them ever go into military service. So it's not about recruiting kids for the military. In fact, I would say probably 75 to 80% of my kids would like to join the military, but probably only about 20% of them can because they can't meet the entrance requirements, mainly from the medical standpoint. One of my cadets went up to MEPS to have their medical exam to join the Army National Guard last week, and he came back and he said, "Sir, there was 14 of us in there to do the medical exam. I was the only one that passed." So the medical requirements are very difficult. You can't be on any medication. You can't have asthma. A lot of those things disqualify you from joining the military. So it is not about recruiting folks. Who do I work for? Anybody know?
The people behind you.
No. Who do I work for? Who's my boss? Fargo Public Schools. You guys pay my paycheck. I am not I am a retired Air Force officer. I retired back in 2007 with 26 years of service in active duty military. But I work for the district. I don't work for the Air Force. We're an Air Force program. They support us, and they pay for half of my salary, and they pay for a lot of the uniforms and things. But we are not a recruiting agency. In fact, recruiting is a 4-letter word for us. We don't like to talk about that. Our headquarters doesn't like to talk about that because that's not what we do. We're about making better citizens for America. Any other questions I can answer for you?
And Nikki, go ahead.
I do have a quick question because you just answered the second one I had. Wondering what the regular school day looks like for these guys. How does this all fit into their regular curriculum?
Mr. Browski, let him talk. He's a Davie student, so he has to come over to North.
So as a Davies student, typically you have a travel period. I have first period ROTC in the morning. We have practices that start normally at 7 o'clock that go to 8. I will then have first period ROTC class at South, and then I'll take the shuttle bus over to Davies. And that way I can still have a full school day without having to sacrifice a period. And it actually, I think, works really well. And I actually get to have a longer day, which I like. And I know that's a similar situation for our cadets at North.
The South students have a huge advantage because they don't have to take that travel period. They're already there. So we're just an elective class, like any other elective class. We have 5 periods a day where the cadets can take any period, whether they're freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. They can take any one of those 5 periods. The North and Davies kids have to travel over to us. The South kids, just another class in this school. So as they were saying, our practices are in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. It's getting near the end of the school year. I tried to do away with practices, but they say, sir, we got to practice. We got to come in. So they, you know, even though it's early in the morning, it's something they'd like to do. And we usually do 5 days a week practices in the morning. And then normally we have color guards at night. We were supposed to have some other color guards because of weather that have been canceled out. How many color guards we do a year? You guys know?
Like for 100?
About 100 color guards a year we do in the local area. A lot of sporting events. We do these individuals are part of our varsity color guard. We have a normal color guard team. Anybody in the Corps any cadet can do a color guard if they come to practice and get certified. But we have our varsity team that have gone through tryouts, and those are folks that do the high visibility things, the state tournaments. You've probably seen us maybe on TV at different state tournaments. We've gone down to the Timberwolves game and done a color guard down there a few years back. We do a number of conventions. We were over at the Able Games this week. We were over at the Able Games, did a couple color guards for them. So it's just not the school system. We kind of support the entire local community with color guards. We're kind of the go-to color guard for a lot of activities here in the local area. So, and then like I said, they do color guards at night, weekends. Last Saturday we were at the Able Games doing community service. This weekend we got a pancake breakfast. Anybody want some pancake breakfast on Saturday morning? Come over to the VFW over in Dilworth. We're doing a pancake breakfast, $6 a person. To help support our parents group. Then the next week we do our Baton Death March. And if you want to join us, you're welcome. 15-mile hike. We start at Davies High School. We walk to South. I'll give you some pizza. We turn around and go back to Davies. So it's about 15 miles we're going to hike on that Saturday. It's a memorial of the Baton Death March during World War II over in the Philippines. So we do that. And the cadets earn a ribbon, and they have a lot of fun doing that walk. So. Then the following week, we have our change of command. I think I invited all the board members to the change of command. You're welcome to come on the 7th of May. It's at South High School. If you've never seen a formal military parade, it's something to be seen. The whole cadet squadron will be out there, do a pass and review. We'll do the change of command from our senior class over to the junior class for the year. And then we have our exhibition teams. We'll do a little performance, then we break, and we have our annual award ceremony and those type of things. But if you're interested, you're welcome to come over and sit through the change of command with us. It takes about maybe 20 to 30 minutes, but it's kind of a cool thing to watch. It's pretty, we usually have about 200 to 300 parents and relatives that come out and watch it, so it's pretty cool thing to see if you've never seen it before.
Well, that was very, very informative. Thank you. Thank you for representing your organization so well. What a special way for us to open up a board meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, have a good evening. I'm sorry, David. I'm so sorry, guys. Okay.
Wait.
I'm so sorry. I thought I looked for hands.
No, first of all, I want to thank you for coming. You make me very proud to see you and to know what you stand for. I did have 2 quick questions. Number 1, are any of you considering a career in the military? And number 2, Devin, you didn't have a rank. Did they bust you?
I just didn't say it. I'm a major.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Don't leave. I have to make sure. Does anybody else have questions? Sorry. Okay, thank you for your patience. Have a nice evening.
Thank you. Good evening too.
Okay, before I seek approval of the agenda, I just want to mention that President Knutson is joining us by the phone tonight. So welcome, Rebecca. I will entertain.
Good evening.
I will entertain approval of the agenda. Jim?
I move adoption of the agenda with the addition of an HR addendum to be added to item 6C.
Second.
Okay, motion.
Madam President,
Yes.
could I have the HR addendum moved to business?
Sure. So that would be item 6C, move down to, let's make that 7E. Does that sound okay, David? Thank you. Okay. I see no other hands. Please vote by saying, it's been a while since I've done this, guys. Please vote yes to approve the agenda as presented with the HR addendum.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed, no? Okay, we will move forward. On to the recognition of the audience. We do have two citizens that have signed up to address us tonight. So we will allow 4 minutes each. We have Devin Stasinski and Kristen Charbonneau. I will read a little bit here before you come up to speak. At this time, the board will hear comments from the public. We ask that each speaker who has signed up to address the board state their name and home school district for the record. Speakers must refrain from using this forum to criticize or complain about a specific employee or student by name. Vulgar or profane language will not be tolerated. The board is interested in your comments and will listen carefully, but is not obligated to respond to or debate issues in this forum. Should you desire a written response to a specific question, you may request it. This evening, each speaker will be allotted a maximum, as I mentioned, 4 minutes. Upon conclusion of the allotted time, a chime will sound, and the speaker is asked to conclude. If necessary, a final chime will sound 15 seconds later, signifying the end of the speaker's time at the podium. I will now call on our first speaker, Devin. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, here I am again, and I'm going to address the same thing I addressed a month ago. I'd like to address the changes to GP 3E Section 2, where we have come to a situation where there's going to be a lot of confusion going forward. Because as the wording changed to in the district's best interest and no longer beliefs, and you had members of the board say, I do not want to do the Pledge of Allegiance based on my beliefs or lack thereof, which is beliefs. Like the song says, if you haven't made a choice, you've still made a choice. So now we come to a situation where who is operating in the best interest of the district? Is it the 7 that voted for the Pledge of Allegiance or the 2 that voted against? Now we have to ask this question at every single split vote, because the school board is never going to be unanimously voting on very touchy subjects. So that's all I have to say is now we have an issue because now we don't know who's voting in best interest of the district.
Thank you, Devin. Next speaker is Kristen Charbonneau.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to speak in regards to memo 105, the superintendent contract. My question to the board is, what message is this sending to staff of Fargo Public Schools if you approve this contract? I've either listened or attended every board meeting this school year. I've heard a number of level 3 grievances come to the board, which indicate concerns brought by staff to the superintendent have not been resolved at a level 1 or level 2. Last meeting, instead of addressing the real issue of the school counselor workload, the superintendent picked a fight over whether or not counselors were considered teachers in the contract. Effective leadership would seek ways to find resolution instead of searching for loopholes to sidestep the real issue. The real issue was that school counselors are overworked, which was even indicated in the superintendent's own information, which stated a recommended student to counselor ratio of 250 to 1, which is not anywhere close to what is currently happening in Fargo Public Schools. Increases in pay should reflect an approval of job performance. The superintendent is responsible for day-to-day operations. Student achievement is at an all-time low, as well as teacher morale. What is the basis for this pay increase? He is already the highest paid superintendent in the state. What message is it sending that he is giving a meal allowance of $5,000 per year when we have staff members that don't even have the opportunity to eat lunch? The proposed contract would make his pay almost $900 per day, while the board was unwilling to pay substitute teachers $200 pay per day. So again, I just ask you, when you're considering this proposed contract, for you to really consider what message you are sending to other employees of the district and the community at large. Thank you.
Thank you. On to the next item on the agenda, and it is the report section of the FEA report. Is anybody here to present? Oh, welcome.
Hello, I'm Lynette Chrisman, and I am the treasurer of FEA. I'm also a counselor at Ben Franklin. On behalf of FEA, a couple things that we are looking forward to is on April 23rd, we have a delegate assembly in Bismarck, and we're hoping to bring 18 representatives. That also is a weekend where there is an ESP conference as well. Two of the May things we're looking forward to is the first week in May is Teacher Appreciation Week. And then we look forward to celebrating the retirement celebration on May 17th. As a counselor, I just wanted to mention that at Ben Franklin, we do Positive T-shirt Tuesday, and here it is Tuesday. So yesterday, Mr. Martin reminded all of us, students and staff, to wear a positive T-shirt. So if you're ever at Ben Franklin on a Tuesday, please wear a positive T-shirt. And I just wanted to thank the school board for all of the nice compliments and comments you did make. A month ago, I guess, we were hoping to showcase the whole school counseling department, and your agenda is so full that we are looking forward to doing that in the fall. And that is it.
Lynette, can we expect that we'll get some dates and locations for the retirement celebration? Okay, that's always fun to go to. Thank you. Superintendent report, Dr. Gandhi.
Thank you. No updates for today. We are monitoring the weather for the rest of the week, and hopefully it holds. But we do have this Friday is a no school holiday, and then on Monday is going to be one of our 2 storm makeup days that we're going to be utilizing for this year.
Thank you. Next item is the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion for the consent agenda with the exception of 6C. Jim?
I move adoption of the consent agenda as provided in our packet.
Okay, Tracy?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of proceeding with the consent agenda, please vote by saying yes.
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 Any opposed? No. Motion passes. On to the business section. North High School Track Project. Turn it over to Dr. Gandhi for introductions.
Sure, and Jim or any a member of the planning committee, feel free to chime in as well. What you have in your board packet is a proposal to assist some donors that have done a tremendous job in a short period of time of raising some funds to provide an alternate to the North High Track Project. So the North High Track Project is currently designed. It's a need for North High. It's a conversation that we've had in the past because of the partnership with NDSU and some track renovations that they are doing there. The nature of a track project is it's circular, and you're going to have a grass field in between, inside. So there were a group of individuals, actually one individual that spearheaded North High boosters to raise almost $1 million to provide an alternate for turf. Where we are at this point in time, which is very close to going out for, we've gone through the bidding process, but starting the work to get this work done, is that there is a little bit of a remaining gap that wasn't accounted for. That's really coming from the construction and architectural fees as well. So that was presented to planning, and planning had decided to bring that conversation here for the board for a consideration of would the board be able to assist with that project. Following the planning conversation, we had a second planning meeting as well. Part of that was because some of the funds that were raised were also taking a look at a commitment from another entity that would potentially be utilizing that track or field or maybe even other facilities as well. And so that's one of the options that's in your board packet. So essentially the conversation today is that there have been some individuals that have really worked really hard to raise some funds for an alternate to this project. Unfortunately, it's not at the 100% mark of where the bids came in, but would the board be able to assist? And I do know that the agenda item lists this as a North High Track project, but the reality of the situation is that we do lack green space on the north side of our buildings, which is in your project, and this would be significantly assist Ben Franklin as well. If, as you know from our previous discussions, turf does have longer durability, longer maintenance, longer health benefits for students as well, but it is more usability as well in terms of being able to repurpose after a game or an event, a phy-ed class, whatever the needs may be. So it definitely is listed as North High, but could be a benefit to Ben Franklin as well. So I'll hand it over to Jim or anyone else if there's any other things.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, planning looked at this a couple of different times. And clearly, we believe as a committee that there is a need at Ben Franklin in particular, but also at North, that could be serviced by this artificial turf. One of the concerns that came up, and it was the reason we had a second planning committee meeting, was we became aware of the fact that part of the funds that had been pledged towards this project were actually coming from Oak Grove High School, or Oak Grove school system, with an understanding that they would have a use agreement for not just this facility, but a variety of facilities at North High. And planning looked at that, had some questions about whether or not, number one, that was feasible in terms of the total use of that space. And then also had asked Jackie to figure out, well, what's the revenue differential? If instead of taking a contribution of $250,000 for this use agreement, if they just rented the facility under our current rental arrangements, which are available to any entity in the community, what would the differential be? And in your packet, I believe you see the estimate that the annual rental fee that we would collect in today's dollars is about $38,000 based upon the potential use that Oak Grove would have. I believe as a planning committee, we were comfortable going forward with the understanding of accepting the $750,000 of actual contributions that didn't come with a use agreement, and if need be, fund the differential through building fund or either that or the general fund balance. We have capacity in both, depending upon what the sense of the board would be. So I will put forward a motion on behalf of planning that the Board of Education fund alternate 2 for the artificial turf within the track at North High School at an estimated amount of $350,000 upon receipt of the remaining $750,000 from the North High Booster Club, and administration award the contract accordingly.
Second.
Okay, motion's on the floor. Discussion. Tracy?
Was the Davies turf fully fundraised, or did Fargo Public Schools help contribute to part of that? And if so, what was the amount we contributed?
The turfs on the football fields at North, South, and Davies were all raised by booster clubs and donations. So this is quite a bit different. This is not the football field at North. That was actually the first artificial turf in our district. This is going to be on the inside of the new track that we're building. And really, if you read the memo, the big advantage is going to be to Ben Franklin in having this. And of course, thank you to the North High community that raised $750,000 to offset the cost of it. In the long run, correct me if I'm wrong here, Jackie, but I believe the annual estimated maintenance cost will save enough over the 10-year cycle to actually fund our $350,000 if we have to pay that much, just an annual maintenance going forward.
Seth?
I'd also add, along with any rental that we would rent to Oak Grove for the use of the space too. So, yeah.
Tracy?
Right, another question. So what is on the inside of the other tracks at the other 2 high schools? I think my question is kind of an equity one, like, are we gonna be down the road looking to fund this at 2 other high schools, or?
I don't know that there's any intention at the 2 other high schools. The other high schools actually have their track around the football field, but there is no room to put the track around the North High football field. So I have not heard that there's a desire at either of the other 2 facilities for additional AstroTurf, but Who knows what the future will bring, Tracy?
David?
The gentleman that proposed this to us the first time, his first name was Greg, I forget what his last name was. Has he ever reached out to us that we've been able to explain our reservations to him on his fundraising?
Not to me.
I have, and I think visited with the individual that's kind of spearheaded a lot of the fundraising, who's done a phenomenal job with that. He's met with me even this morning just to ask some questions and get some clarity. I think for the North High community, they value the turf. They knew the conflicting interests that school districts have and the tough decisions board members have to make. So for them, they were working really from the premise of what can we do to get this for our students and not lose out on that opportunity. But at the same point, if alternate 2 were to move forward, that really would fulfill their needs because their number one priority is providing a set of services for students, and that's through the turf field. So they don't have a direct obligation to have to follow through with the contract. That was something that they were exploring because fundraising's hard. And you're sometimes going to ask anyone you can because you want to do something that's right for kids. And that was an opportunity. So I think they would be very supportive as long as this is something that that can move forward with understanding that the district would obviously be able to look at facility rentals for anyone that wants to be able to use that through our standardized process down the road.
I have a question. So you mentioned that this could be used, funded out of the building fund or the general fund. I would be a little bit more comfortable knowing which fund this would come out of. So can we talk about the pros and cons of using each?
We sure can. I personally think we should take it out of the building fund, but we have capacity in the general fund as well.
So could your motion include the building fund? Because I'm more inclined to support it with the building fund, but I can't change the motion sitting in this chair. Or you don't have to.
I would.
So
make a
are you
motion-
asking
I would
for
make a
an
motion for
amendment?
an amendment
It's up to
to
you guys.
amend
I'm just putting ideas out there.
to amend the motion that the 350,000 come from the building fund.
Second.
Okay. The amendment's on the floor, and then Anne Marie is going to ask us to word our motion, our amendment.
I'd have down that Seth moved to add to the motion that the funds come from the building fund.
Okay. Okay, discussion on the amendment on the floor. Okay, I don't see any hands, so we will now vote on the amendment to add the building fund to the original motion.
Robin, would you like me to call your name last, or would you like President Knudsen's last?
You can call me last.
Okay.
That's fine.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knudsen,
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes, amendment passes. Now back to the original motion with the amendment.
Are you asking her to call the roll?
Well, she's probably just working on her words. Oh, I'm sorry, we need some discussion, don't we?
Well, I just want to, for clarification purposes, because within the memo, right, excuse me, Seth had mentioned 350. I heard Anne Marie say really just an additional, that it comes out of the building fund, because according to the memo, right, if the acceptable terms are agreed upon from the district and the use agreement, it would really only be 100,000, not 350, correct?
No.
Am I not reading that correct?
No. that
No,
wasn't in the
so we're
motion at all.
saying, but it's in the memo, so we're saying that we are not going to partner with Oak Grove.
Correct. They would be able to rent the facility under our use agreement, correct. But no, the motion was specifically do the recommendation on the bottom of the memo, Jennifer.
Right. So, as I mentioned in planning, if I may continue, I'd like to see us partner where we can and provide this opportunity for kids. And I think it's a very generous contribution that Oak Grove has offered. And I don't know what that conversation was between them and the athletic department, but the fact that it got to planning tells me there was some conversation. So I'm not really, I wish that we could have made something work in that partnership because I'd like to see us collaborate more opportunities than not to provide for all the kiddos in the community. We collaborate on a lot of programming in terms of other sports and things like that. So that is one thing that I guess I'm a little disappointed in. I plan to support this for a variety of reasons. Long term, I think it's a good idea, an opportunity for the kids at Ben Franklin that don't already have the, access to this space. So I will support it. I just would have liked to have seen us been able to pull off that partnership.
David, go ahead.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we already do have an agreement with Oak Grove where they are using these facilities on a rental basis, correct?
We co-op with Oak Grove in some activities, and they certainly rent our facilities from time to time. as
So,
other
so,
people in the
so we
community do.
we are providing them, their students, with the benefits of this. The problem I had, and I brought this up during planning, is essentially by this $1 million pledge, they have 1/4 of it, and it concerns me that they in turn may expect 25% of the time, and I honestly don't think between North's usage and Ben Franklin's usage that there's 25% sitting around. So that's why I will support this measure.
Go ahead, Dr. Gandhi.
I might be a little bit late to this, but I should have also mentioned that we do have, if there are any specific questions, a couple of representatives from our North High admin team that are here. So just want to acknowledge them and say thank you for being here. And as I hear the conversation kind of maybe head towards a vote, I just do want to ask board members, if there are specific questions around what this would look like if this were to get passed, now is the time to ask Jackie. I would also ask the question to board members, when the motion says estimated amount of 350,000, is that a hard cap? Is that a soft cap? Does estimated mean if there's variance in a donor falling out between now and then, there's discretion for administration to approve up to a certain point? Just want to get some of that clarity. And then my only other question would be, just as from a systemic lens, is as we take a look at this, we obviously follow a long-range facilities plan and a financial plan as well. We will have several organizations throughout the system that have donated for upgraded facilities or different projects. And I would just hope that down the road, the planning would be willing to consider like a systemic way to approve those projects as we approach them moving forward.
Okay, David?
Thank you for bringing that up. Jim, didn't Greg tell us that some of these pledges were over a 10-year period?
No, I don't recall that, but I think my motion was fairly clear here. It says upon receipt of the remaining 750,000. So I don't know, I'm pretty sure Jackie and I think upon receipt means the same thing. Somebody's going to give her $750,000 worth of something, at which point in time she'll recognize that she is authorized to spend the other $350,000. If indeed it comes in where there's another $25,000, then you have a different problem, because this motion was to authorize $350,000, up to $350,000 upon receipt of $750,000.
Yeah, and that Dr. Gandhi just made me think about that, because I thought that Greg had said that some of these pledges that he had were over a period of time. This thing is going to have to be paid for up front, and we are going to be writing the check. I was just wondering how long it's going to take us to get that $750 back, first of all, and secondly, when it comes back, can it go back to the building fund? I mean, if we ended up having to take $500,000, for instance, out of the building fund to make up the difference, when that other $150 is paid back, can it go into the building fund, or does it have to come back as general fund revenue?
First of all, I believe the project will be paid with from bond funds, if I'm not mistaken. At which point in time we'll be servicing that debt, and this will be the tools that we're servicing it with. And yes, I believe the $750,000 will be deposited into the building fund as satisfaction ultimately for the bond that's going to be tied to this project, which I believe is not too far down our agenda.
Okay, I see no other hands. Okay, Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes, motion carries. Next item on the agenda is business item 7B, 23-24 calendar approval, memo 104. Who would like to take that one?
Dr. Gross?
Dr. Gross, thank you.
Well, thank you very much. As we look at the memo, what it does is it describes the calendar committee. And this year, the calendar committee was comprised of 20 members. We had teachers and parents, students, district office representatives, our FEA representative, support staff, and a school board member. And as what we went through multiple meetings, what we did is we looked at various pieces of information from past survey data that we have given to our community, past calendars that we've looked at. We looked at everything from the different holidays that are required by the statute or by contract. We looked at other holidays that might impact our calendar. And then we looked at some of the data that we had from past state of the school addresses. And based upon all of that information, the calendar that's in front of you or attached to memo 104 was unanimously approved by the calendar committee. I would say in the 16 years that I've worked with the calendar committee, that is the first time we've had a unanimous approval. So I think the group was very happy with the work that we've done. On the calendar, you'll see there's a series of color coding, and there is a key in the middle of that. The one piece I'd like to draw your attention to is a new color that we haven't used up until this calendar, and that would be that light pink or dark pink color, and those would be early outs. What you'll notice is there are 4 of those in this proposed calendar. They would be on October 18th, they would be on December 22nd, there would be one in February on the 16th, and then one in April on the 19th. These would be where we would have 2-hour early outs in the Fargo Public Schools. We would start our school day at the same time. We would run our bus runs. We would have our breakfast programs. We would then run a modified bell schedule during the day. So at the middle school and high school, we would have the same number of periods. They would just be shorter in duration on that day. We would provide lunch to our students, and then we would provide bus service home 2 hours early on those days, so that we could, as a staff, have extended period of time for professional learning communities. So staff across the district could continue to come together to talk about what matters most, our student learning, and what we're going to do to answer some of those critical questions of a professional learning community. One other change I just want to draw your attention to on this calendar is the beginning of our calendar starts with 5 professional development days. In past calendars, we've started with 3 professional development days, and then the others have been throughout the calendar. This calendar committee thought it would be a good idea, and it is certainly supported by the Teaching and Learning Department, to begin our year with some intense professional development for our staff. So that would be the week of August 21st through the 25th. We would meet all contract provisions, so within that time period, we would have 2 half-days of professional practice for our teaching staff. We would have a day probably split up in 2 half-days for the building to do their professional development, and most likely 3 days then for district professional development. In addition to that, you'll see there's a professional development day on January 15th. That's the changeover from the first semester to the second semester. That's why the color blue changes slightly. That's the indicator, the difference between first semester and second. That professional development day, according to contract, would be half professional practice for our staff as they switch over from one semester to the next, and then additional professional development. You will see that in this calendar in March, there is a full week of spring break, and that would be the 11th through the 15th of March. And then this calendar would end the last student contact day on May 30th with a professional practice and professional development day on May 31st. So I think we're able to use a lot of the information that we've received through our survey data, starting a little bit later. We start fairly late in August, ending early, or trying to end in May, which we do on this calendar, and building in a lot of the different factors that we hope will build a very strong calendar that will help our students be as effective and learn as much as they can, and help our staff with their professional development. And again, I just want to end with, it's the first time that we have actually had a unanimous calendar committee. To meet the provision of the contract and the policy, I did share this with all of the PTO and PTA presidents. I then held a Zoom meeting to answer any questions that they may have. So we met that provision as well.
I see Tracy's hand.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Bob. I've served on this committee as a community member and a PTO president, and it's stressful and there's a lot of conflicting interests, and you guys really pour over a lot of data. And thank you, Brian, for representing us. With that, I'll just make a motion that the 2023-2024 school calendar be approved as presented.
Second.
Seth, second. Okay, further discussion. Jennifer. Oh, okay, I got lots of hands. I saw Brian, Jennifer, Nikki.
The other cool thing is the meetings that it took to get 100%. I don't think there was as many as years past, so that was good too.
I think the calendar committee knew what they hoped to accomplish, and we were able to do it in a short amount of time. And even when they went back and got feedback from their peer groups, it was positive feedback around this calendar.
Jennifer?
Thank you. So I have a question, Bob. So when I compared this, looking at the early out specifically, and you mentioned that that was designed and to be utilized for professional development time, they're all on like a Friday or the last day of a shortened week, where prior years that was typically the exception, not the rule. And so I'm just curious, like I just know, like in my world, what do we do professional development? It's the beginning of the week. I'm certain this was, I'm hopefully certain this was part of the conversation, and starting the week with professional develop when we were fresh versus the end of the week. And I would really like to understand what the teachers' take on that, and if you could share maybe what that dialogue was like.
So the committee looked at some of the results of a State of the School address that was a few years ago, when we brought this to our community and asked, would you support early outs? What we found is that the majority of those who gave us feedback said that, one, we would if it is up against either a long weekend or a holiday, or it was connected to another break. So that was one of the things that the committee really wrestled with, is how can we strategically place those days into the calendar that would meet the feedback that we received from our community. The difference between the Mondays and the Fridays and so on, really one other thing that we wrestled with is not having all of our breaks, all of our unique days be on a Monday or a Friday. We tried to balance them the best we can. Although if you look at this calendar, they're not equally balanced, but our snow days are on Mondays. We have many of the natural holidays where we have to have the days off are on Fridays. So it was a balancing act of how we can meet that provision of keeping them close to a long break or a weekend, and then trying to balance the number of Fridays or Mondays that we had off.
Nikki.
Mine was more of a comment. It was a thank you. I know we were trying to find more ways to give teachers more breaks throughout the school year, so I appreciate everybody continuing to look at that. I too have served on this committee and am floored at the fact that you had a unanimous been there, done that, and I don't think I've ever experienced that. So that tells me a lot right there. But thank you for all the work that went into it. I know it's never easy, so thank you.
I've got Brooke and then Jennifer.
Bob and or Brian, just a procedural question. While I do think the survey that gets sent out is administrative in function, I would just want to be curious from the board member's perspective or from your perspective on the committee, the conversation around, you know, the alternating spring breaks, because it's always been consistently 49, 51% data. If this is kind of the move forward, was there a conversation that we would continue to collect that data and look at it for future committees, or was it just kind of like this is where we are at this point in time? I'm not sure if that discussion occurred or not, but just want to know for process.
I think what I recollect is it was just part of the process and that we just keep rotating. I don't remember any conversation on still collecting more data in the future. That was my recollection.
I believe that the committee said we would utilize the data that we had currently because we give that survey on an every other year basis. We certainly would want to ask our community what they think the calendar should look like in the future. Some of the conversations did center around, though, that over the past many years in that every other year survey, staff, students, and our administrators all had a very favorable outlook on a week-long spring break. It was our parents who had a closer 50-50, although each year that we've given that survey, that has spread just slightly, not dramatically, but slightly. I think one thing that the committee looked at is when we tried to fill in the dates on this calendar, we were able to do a week-long spring break and still start a little bit later than we typically do, maybe end a little bit earlier than we typically do, and build that all into the calendar. This just happened to work this way. I think we will continue to gather information from our community through another survey, and then each calendar committee really starts with a blank sheet of paper as we build that calendar together.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. So if I may just ask you a follow-up, thank you for the clarification or the information. Will there be an effort to measure attendance then moving forward to see if this was basically neutral to our attendance attainment in past years, or if by moving it to Friday it increased or decreased, if it had any measurable impacts? Is the district or the calendar committee prepared to basically look at that piece of information?
That was not one of the things that we as a committee discussed, but certainly we have an attendance project going on across our system, as we know that attendance is one of those key indicators, student attendance, to on-time graduation, earning the credits that students need, and being academically where we want them to be. So we certainly have an effort across our system to help and to work on attendance. The idea of those 4 early out days and looking at the difference between the attendance rates on those days and others, we can certainly look at that information. One thing that we will need to know, though, is where those dates were chosen are some days that families would take off already because they are connected to a holiday, and sometimes a family may decide to extend that holiday by taking their sons or daughters out of school. I don't know if we'll be able to say it's directly related to the early out or if it's directly related to where it's connected to some of those holidays in the calendar, but we can certainly look at that data.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to know. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Gandhi.
Also, just know that the impact of this will go across a couple of different stakeholder groups, not only student attendance, but also staff as well. We do have historically certain days, Mondays and Fridays, and then also sometimes leading up to extended holidays where we have higher amount of staff absences or higher amount of needs for subs as well. There will be conversations around the early out days of the how that impacts our staff absentee rate, right? It's a half day of instruction, so that could be beneficial for staff to not miss instructional time, but at the same point, is that an investment for substitutes for the district to take a look at? So we'll be looking at this as it relates to a couple of different stakeholder groups, but we do think that there's going to be a wide variety of benefits.
Okay, I'm sensing consensus. Any last questions? Okay, it looks like we're ready to call the roll, Anne Marie.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes, motion, or calendar again passes unanimously. Got to take advantage of, that's a rough calendar. I've been on that committee too. Somebody just requested a short break. It is 6:25, so let's return at 6:30. Next item on the agenda is business item 7C, Superintendent Contract. I chaired that committee along with Tracy and Seth, so please interject anything that you feel necessary. I'll try to give you an overview at how we arrived at this proposal. There were basically 3 proposed changes to the contract that we'll review soon, but the tools that we used to make this recommendation are listed there. There was, we looked at the summative review evaluation of the superintendent. We gathered the contracts from 4 like-sized school districts. There was a very comprehensive current superintendent and salary benefit study nationwide. Looked at different PTO concepts and the importance of retaining a consistent review format for the term of the contract. And of course, this is a contract that typically lasts 2 years. Then we also consulted with the Human Resource Department, business manager, and legal counsel. So if we go to, let's see here, the second page in this packet, there we overviewed salary and benefits, and we compared RUPOC's contract to West Fargo, Grand Forks, and Bismarck. What we learned was that some districts are 240-day contracts, and 3 have 260-day contracts. One of those is RUPOC's. One district that's listed there in the 4th column, that district pays the employee share of TFFR. That's kind of unique in the area. And each of these districts base the raises to compensation for the superintendent, made that mirror what the teacher negotiated agreement was. So with the compensation piece, we are recommending to mirror what our teachers received to that line item, with 2.21% the first year and 2.0% the second year. It was noted here that Dr. Gandhi declines medical insurance, which totals about $15,000 a year. He is again declining it for the length of this contract. And then where it got sticky is we tried to compare the contracts with all the other benefits, and we just really couldn't compare apples to apples. So what we did is we looked into a leave process. During the pandemic, it became very obvious that Dr. Gandhi needed to be available at all times. And I know that he was working on his vacation. And we sat down and had a discussion of what would be a realistic way that for you to take time off, knowing you'd be responsible for that. And so maybe in a minute there, I'll have you help me go through that. But what we're looking to do is remove his 35 days of PTO that were in the previous contract and move those down to 0 and creatively pay those out. And then there was also a request to consider, we already have language in the contract about using our policy governance model, which would stay in effect for the length of the contract. And it was requested that we add a clause to follow that for his evaluation process. And personally, as somebody that had, through my work, I would like to know what I am going to be evaluated on before my contract starts. And so I thought that was a reasonable request. So what I'd like to do is entertain a motion to bring this to the floor for discussion, and then maybe talk to REPOC a little bit here. Jim?
I'd like to move that the board approve the 2022 through 2024 contract with Dr. Rupak Gandhi, and approve and have it signed accordingly by the president of the board and Dr. Gandhi.
Second.
Okay, motion's on the floor. Dr. Gandhi, can you explain?
Need a second.
Oh, no, it was Tracy. Tracy seconded. Sorry, she's quiet. Dr. Gandhi, can you run us through a little bit of, it was a very comprehensive conversation about the concept of zeroing out your PTO days. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Essentially, the concept is really just the system that's currently had, and this is true for education and specifically in North Dakota as well, leave system is often tied to a potential compensation that could be saved down the road as well, and that's why they're tied to accrual calendars, accrual systems based on our fiscal calendar. What I was able to show and what you can see from the days that I've already saved is that we will always, at least the way I work is I'll always roll over the maximum amount of days that I can. But the way that the current system works with the rules within it for accrual is one that basically says your calendar works from June to July. You have to take off, you're going to have use it or lose it days by the end of June 30th before the next calendar starts, and then that system starts again. That to me isn't necessarily the most conducive piece, because when you're paying someone and you're giving them a certain amount of paid time off, along with other leaves as well that were in the previous contract or that are in the current contract, those are oftentimes that you're expecting that employee not to be able to provide a set of services or work at that time for the district. I think times have changed where there's also a difference between accessibility and working, and I don't think that we're no longer just compensating work by time served or that time that someone's in the district. I think there's flexibility there. So what this model does is instead of 35 days of PTO that were being used for 20 days of rollover and then a potential payout on a daily basis, it's reducing it to 30, getting rid of emergency leave, getting rid of funeral leave. Basically, the concept is just take leave as needed based on the ebb and flow of your work, making sure that the district services aren't interrupted. I have an emergency succession plan. That's one of the first reports that's monitored by the Board of Education. Should anything ever happen where the superintendent is inaccessible for a significant amount of time, I think it would behoove the district and the students that we serve to ensure that someone else is filling in those services, whether it's in an interim basis or elevating someone else that's part of the succession plan. And I think they should get compensated appropriately too. The current model would put the district at risk because you would have to pay, if I have an extended amount of leave days that I could use, then I would be able to use that, and then you'd have to pay for those services, whatever that situation may be. The proposed model with the flexible leave, if that's what we want to call it, or the discretionary leave, whatever the term that is that you want to use, should the superintendent be absent or be unable to fulfill the service of the district, the board can then make that decision. But I would never be collecting, according to the terms of the current contract, leave days. Leave days are just a mechanism used to get to the compensation, which is already built into the previous system as well, but we're 5 less days. Now, the investment for the district and the initial part would be starting the leave bank from 100 versus 80, and then starting this contract term versus the buyout at 15 days at 120. So
Okay. It was hard for me to follow at first, but it does make sense here eventually. So, questions? Go ahead.
And so are you saying that there is no other comparison for this kind of proposal, or what did you use to base this model off of?
Locally, it was hard to compare all the other benefits that were within the local districts. They were just, some of them had extra mileage, some of them had different leave times, so it was really hard to lay them down and put them in columns like I tried very hard to do, and it looked like a disaster. So
did you put like a dollar amount then to them? So if you can't compare them that way, could you compare them to a compensation amount, or sort of define them in that way? I see you shaking your head. Maybe yes, no? Like a compensation package, right? We put a dollar amount on health benefits, but if we're looking at this and we, theirs is a variety, whether it's travel or whether it's, a different type of PTO, there must be a dollar associated with that or a cost associated with that. Did you compare it that way?
No, I just looked to see what the annual premium for health insurance, and I plugged that in there.
But I'm sorry, as far as this other
No,
sort
I
of.
did not.
Okay.
Go ahead, David.
First of all, I have no problem with the salary. The fact that, comparing the large school districts, we've always attempted to pay all of our staff very, very well. So the thousands of dollars between these is not an issue. I do, and maybe it's just the way it's stated, I do have a real issue with number 3 at the very top of the contract consideration page, where it essentially says that the superintendent shall write his own evaluation, because it says cannot be modified without the superintendent's consent. I'm very uncomfortable with that kind of language. So I'd like to have you as the chair explain what exactly you meant by that when it
Sure.
was put in.
Sure, it's not, he wouldn't change his evaluation. The evaluation process wouldn't change. So we'd use basically what we're doing now, the same format for his evaluation. And that wouldn't change throughout the terms of this contract. So he knows what will be reviewed upon before signing the contract.
Which would be similar to what we do with the teachers, where you can't, we can't change anything in their master contract during the terms.
Correct.
Okay, so it coincides with the teacher's contract.
Right.
The other thing that I was struggling with as I went through this, some of this, I think I understood this, but where it talks about compensation, it says his salary shall be such and such, which includes the employee contribution portion of TFFR. So Dr. Gandhi's portion of TFFR will be taken out of the gross salary,
Correct.
not added on top as they do in West Fargo.
Correct.
Okay. Just one more thing. And that was, I was trying to make some sense out of this, this 30 days per year. Basically, Dr. Gandhi works a 260-day contract. And I understood the language that, I think it was in one of the clarifications you set out, where you have to work when there's work to be done. So I'm just wondering, will this 30 days ever be used? If he takes 5 days for a funeral or whatever, and he just works an additional 5 days, he works 260 days during the year, then he'd never have to tap into any of this 30-day package, correct? So he should, in essence, he should be able to accrue 20 days and be paid for 10 days every single year. All he's got to show through his weekly updates that are sent to us is that he worked 260 days during the year.
Yeah, and I kind of compare our jobs a little bit in that I'm on call 24 hours a day. So there are days when he's going to be working 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. It's never really an 8-hour day. So yeah, I think you explained that correctly. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you. So to add on, one of the questions that was asked was around the current contract and the ability to change it, from year to year, right? In terms of this governance model section or section 3. When you look at BSR 5 and what reports we're supposed to be using or can use, the methods that we can use, does this language restrict us from modifying or basically using, as it says, by external report, like 2B, external report, which is a disinterested third party selected by board, to go to sort of evaluate whether or not we're in compliance or the superintendent is in compliance with board policies. I mean, that might need to be done at year 2 of a contract. And so does this language hinder the board from being able to do that? Because it says it in here, but practice has been different, right? And so are we tying the hands of the board to say, well, no, this is policy, we just don't currently do that? Do you see what I'm saying?
No.
So if you pull up BSR 5 and it talks about monitoring the superintendent's performance, it's by internal report, right? By external report or by direct board inspection. And this is implying that this is implying only one way, and we're not necessarily doing it this way currently.
The contract language says we can't change that EL language that you just read, unless it's mutually agreeable during the terms of the contract. It doesn't restrict which of those tools we're going to use.
So the two, okay, so that's what I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. So if the board decides that the tools we're going to use to evaluate the superintendent need to be different for whatever reason, they have still the authority to do that.
Sure. It's that the ELs cannot be changed without consensus during the contract.
And the ELs so you're saying the ELs cannot, thank you for clarifying. So the ELs cannot be changed unless the superintendent agrees. Can you
And the
give us
board.
an example?
It's consensus by both parties.
Right, but what if the board agrees to, or needs to and wants to change an EL and the superintendent says, no, I don't agree to that?
Then we have to wait until the next superintendent contract to do it.
And
Basically the same thing that we're doing with the teacher contract. We cannot change the terms of the contract till we sit down to negotiate with them again. And that's what this is saying. You can't change the terms of my ELs until you negotiate with me again. Doesn't mean we can't use the ELs. In fact, we will.
I think you're really tying the board's hands in, I mean, we can't forecast the future and when a board might need to be, or be forced to change an EL given circumstance. And even if we can't change a teacher contract, well, I think we can, even though we're in a contract, if something comes up, modifications have been made, but the superintendent has authority over the teachers as well. So if the board's hands are tied and the superintendent has administrative policies that he leans on, I mean, he's our employee. So to me, I'm just trying to think of it as an employee. I don't know that there was ever a time where I could say, well, wait a minute, never mind this circumstance, this external circumstance. I don't agree to that.
Well,
Sure, that would be
Let me ask you a
great.
question, Jennifer. Do you have an employment contract or are you an at-will employee? Because they're two different things.
Right, but
okay?
it's still.
I have at-will employees in my company and I also have employees that have a contract. Two completely different things that I have to deal with.
I still think you're
Our
tying-
employees that are teachers and our superintendent have an actual contract of employment. They're not at-will employees.
I get it, but I still think there's a lot of contracted employees where when employers have a way to the little asterisk at the bottom, right? Exceptions applied. And so I just think you're taking that away from the board by putting this language in there. You're taking that ability away from the board. And I just feel like it's a bit of a risky, slippery slope.
I see Seth and Rupa.
Well, I mean, I get your concern, but I feel that there's a couple of things that we're mirroring with our teacher contract, with our superintendent contract. If we're not willing to uphold how we're going to evaluate our teachers in their contract and we're going to change the rules of the game on them, that wouldn't be fair to them. I feel that we should have the same respect to our contracted employee with our superintendent. If we say at the outset of his contract, this is how we're going to evaluate you, we shouldn't be changing the rules of the game in the middle of the game, and we would never dream of doing that with the teachers either. And so I'd be curious at what circumstances you might arise. I'd be curious about that, but I mean, it's a 2-year contract. This isn't 15 years. I would assume that's why we do 2-year contracts, because things do change.
I see some Anne Marie.
Yeah, I just want to make sure you guys are looking on page 4 of the contract attached to your memo. Under that second paragraph, the sentence does say the district will not change its operation under a policy governance model, its adherence to the governance process, or its board superintendent relationships policies during the term of the contract without superintendent's consent. I heard ELs kind of fall into that conversation, and that's not listed here. So I just want to make sure you're all on the same page as far as what's on page 4 there.
Did you have your hand up, Tara?
Yes, that is very helpful because I'm, again, not, and thank you, because I think that maybe, does that help clarify it at all in certain circumstances? Because it's almost like then you're saying, if you're saying ELs, then the superintendent is dictating board basically work, right? To that degree, and it seems backwards. to me. So that's where I was, thank you for the clarification.
Did you have something to add, Rupa?
Same thing. I was just going to say, ELs can be changed. The ELs are the executive limitations that the board puts on the superintendent, dictate scope of work, can dictate what you can, cannot do. All of that would, yeah, that is the checks and balances for the board as well. So that is not something that the board is prohibited from changing. It's the relationship, the dynamic of how we're working, what's expected of that job function.
Okay. David, do you have? one
Yeah,
last
I
question?
do. I wish this could be broken out into two motions. As I said to begin, I have absolutely no issue with the salary that's, I think it's deserved. I think it's in line with what is expected in a job such as Dr. Gotti has. This 30-day package really gives me pause, and there's a couple of reasons. We just spent quite a bit of time talking about how our contract essentially, his contract essentially mirrors the master contract for the teachers, and yet this is very, very, very different. Teachers are paid for unused sick leave, but they're paid at 50% of their salary. This is full 100% salary. And the second one is the fact that because if he puts in 260 days, he can legitimately bank 20 days and be paid for 10. Teachers are never given that opportunity. They can't say, well, I had to take 10 days of sick leave, but I'll come back and I'll work 10 days in June. They don't have that opportunity. So I am not in favor of the portion of the contract that includes this 30-day lump sum period.
You are welcome to divide the question.
It's not necessarily a question to be divided in that
I don't know how
way.
you'd do that. It's
Okay.
a contract.
No, it's fair. It's fair. I kind of viewed it as if he were to be paid out sooner, if we were to pay out his banked days when he retires at the rate at which he retires, that dollar amount would be higher. So when we compared monetarily, it really didn't make a difference in the end to the cost to the district. Jackie ran those numbers for me. Go ahead.
David, I think you have some kind of very valid thoughts. What I would share with you is that what you just described, the 30 days with the 20 days, those are provisions in the current contract. The difference is it's 35, and then once you hit the threshold, which would be in 2 years, you could cash out 15 days for each annual year and then roll over 20 to a certain point. What this does is instead of giving you that flexibility and putting the employee in the situation where you have to pick between, okay, should I take a day here or should I not take a day here? When we do have the ability to work remotely, we have the ability to still be accessible if we're on vacation or not. This just says, okay, it's 30, 20, 10 consistently every year instead of giving you the option up to 15. So that's where some of that's going to get counteracted as well. And then the difference is, unlike the other maybe employee contract, there's no defined time, there's no overtime, there's none of that as well. So that's where the payoff is. It's not about the days and the numbers. Those are actually, one can make the argument that those are higher in the current contract because you can, once you hit the 120 threshold, you can roll cash, you can get paid for 15 days. This is actually 30 days. It's more defined, but they're not days. It's just compensation. They're not days that can be used for not providing a service to the district. And that's the difference for the district as well.
I'm sensing some consensus here. Brian, did you have something to add?
You know, I hear what you're saying, David. With teachers, it's hard to compare with him because they have a set amount of days where they're supposed to be. Whereas Rupak, he's 260 days all the time. And you don't know if it's at 6 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning until 10 at night or what have you. So I found myself, like you, I found it hard to compare the two. It just didn't make sense to me. So I don't know how you do that.
David?
Excuse me. I don't want it to look at all like I'm not giving Dr. Gandhi credit for as much as he works. I'd be extremely surprised to find out that in a year's time you don't work more than 260 days. because, I mean, you simply work as much as you have to do to finish the job. It's just that we're, you know, basically what we're doing is we're giving him a contract, and then we're giving him 30 more days per year pay. Because he, by working the 260 days, he will never, ever have to use any of those 30 days. So they'll simply be banked. So when he leaves this district, he will be paid an additional 30 days at his then current salary for every year that he was here. And that isn't the way that we treat many of the leaves that teachers are given, for instance, as Dr. Gandhi, I believe, said himself, are use it or lose it. There's no lose here at all. He has 30 days every single year.
Jennifer?
Thank you. The other thing that I see missing, and I don't know if this was part of your conversation at the ad hoc, but really is sort of measurement performance indicators. And so the banked days, I really would think it would be helpful to also have a dollar amount or an estimated dollar amount put on that, because that's a liability on the books, right? Our long-term. And so I think that that's a valid point. And so if the only way to fix that is to say no to this contract and go really back to the table and negotiate that differently, maybe that's what we ought to do, right? And measured performance indicators, back to that, you know, when we look at student outcomes, and I know we've had this conversation about tying things to achievement, and that it is something that we certainly employ the superintendent to pay attention to this. and I don't think he would disagree with that. And our current policies don't really do a great job of measuring that in terms of measured results. We don't really tie it to that. And so I think certainly this is a time to say, and to look to all of you to say, how did you even come to 2.21 or 2.0? Is it just a number? Is it automatic escalator every single year, no matter what our performance is? Because ELs are not tying your results to student outcomes. And as we know, they have been on the decline for even previous, 5 years plus. And so what are we doing to hold, to measure accountability, to achieve the desired results? Because we all want to see those numbers turn around and go the other way. And so how do we do that, right, as a board, effectively and fairly, and the right way? And I think that needs to be part of this evaluation. I think that's fair. And I think that we need to have that discussion.
Go ahead, Nikki.
My response to that would be, Jen, when I take a look at a lot of these things, this is a nationwide problem. And Dr. Gandhi has told us time and time again that these things can be changed, these numbers can be raised, but we have to sacrifice other things to do that. And our community is not willing to do that, such as giving up various things. It might be orchestra, it might be music, might be FIAD, might be something, but something's got to give. If we focus all of our money and all of our intent on student achievements, and we go down to the 4 basics, we can do it, but it's also a nationwide program. So I have a tough time saying, well, you got to point the finger at him and he's got to fix it, because he can't fix a nationwide program. There's many other cogs in this clock that need to change in order to be able to hold one single person accountable for that. I know it's a concern and I know we should talk about it, but we also have to talk about all the other things that have to go along with that if we're going to hold him singly accountable for that.
Tara?
So the only thing that I would clarify as far as what the contractual language allows for is that there is a maximum amount. He would not have the authority to roll 30 days over into perpetuity. It's a 260-day total for the duration. That would be the first thing that I would clarify. And then in regards to liability to the district, the last contract provided 260 days that you could roll over up to. And so the amount that the district will essentially have on the books is not going to change.
Jim?
I'm going to move previous question.
Second.
Okay. Anne Marie?
Voting on previous question to end debate, Paulson,
No.
Benson,
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
sorry, Newman.
Yes.
Okay.
Voting on the motion on the floor, Benson.
The motion is to approve the contract. Is that what we're voting on?
Correct.
No.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
No.
Robin Nelson.
Yes. Motion carries. On to the bond sale resolution. And that looks like Jackie and Rupach can introduce that.
So the protest period for issuing the bonds has passed, and there were no protests filed. So the next step in the process is to have you approve the resolutions attached to the board memo. At this time, initially we would plan to bond for both the track and field project as well as the Hawthorne addition. The Hawthorne addition is on hold for now, still going through that planning, and we plan to hopefully get that bid out then, this coming fall and do that work next spring. So we'll have to reassess where we're at that time with funding of that project. So this would only be for the track project. I do want to clarify just on some previous discussion that this would not include the alternate for the turf inside the track, just because the donations are coming in for that and would plan to be paid with that project. And then we'll just now pay for the remainder of that through the building fund when that time arrives. So this is really just for the actual track, and then we had a few other, and the parking, and a few other alternates that were included in that.
Jim?
I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution determining that no protests were filed, adopt the resolution providing for the public sale of $7,485,000 of limited tax school building bonds, Series 20-022A, and adopt a resolution providing for participation in the school bond credit enhancement program.
Second.
Okay. Tracy, second. Discussion. I see no hands. Anne Marie?
Gullickson,
Yes.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson.
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes, motion carries. Now we have the additional item moved down from the consent agenda. David pulled item 6C, human resource actions. David?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. When I read through this, when it was sent out to us, I had one concern and one question. The first was, this one included, now this one that we received at our table has only 3, but the original one that was sent out, I believe, had either 5 or 6 resignations. The thing that concerned me was all of those people had been with us 5 years or less. And we've talked during negotiations, we certainly talked about recruiting and retaining, and it really bothered me to look and see that we had, it seemed like for one, this was just one of our series of resignations, that we've had so many people who are so new to our district. I guess I'd like to have us examine if we do have a problem, if there is a retention problem. I think we could do that by looking at exit surveys, see if there's any specific issues that are causing people to leave. There's so many reasons that they may leave. The other one was, and this is also not included on the sheet that is at our table. This time it listed all of the people who are being non-renewed due to overloads. And this was, I would just appreciate it very much if you, Doug, could explain to people why this is being done, why this has to be done rather, and the procedure for doing it.
Absolutely. So any full-time teacher signs a 1.0 contract or a full-time contract. Throughout the year, overloads are given if the needs arise. So I think there was an email sent out to the board. There are different needs that sometimes arise, students in and out of a class, an extra section. So per the teacher's contract, we will, the principal requests an overload, and then we assign that. Because that overload is really not a part of their contract per se, it is an additional assignment. Our intent is that it would not continue. We can't guarantee that that 10% or 20%, or if it's a little bit more, would continue. So we have to non-renew that portion of the contract to get them to their original full-time assignment. If we don't non-renew, it continues at 120 or 110%. So that's the procedure that we have to go to, and about this time every year we have to non-renew those overloads because they're likely not available next year.
Please continue, David.
So then you will have to issue a letter of contemplated non-renewal to each of these people.
Yep, we issue the non-renewal notice, and what they do is they sign off saying they agree to the non-renewal. We file those, and then we put them on the board once they send that back to us.
And if they didn't, it would be just like a teacher non-renewal. If they refuse to sign your letter, they would have to go through the non-renewal process with the board, correct?
Yeah, I think you're correct.
Theoretically, that could happen.
Theoretically, yeah. If they refuse to be non-renewed for that 10%, they could come and go through that process. Yeah.
I just thought it would be valuable for people to understand that because
Sure.
There were so many of them. I'm sure that somebody must have had a question. Thank you, Doug.
Yep, no problem.
Great question, David. Thank you for highlighting that. To your first question, there was that pretty comprehensive survey that you presented to the board that talked about the exit survey. Maybe you could send that to board members. It's a public document after this meeting because it might shed some light on that for us too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I last pulled it, well, it's for my board report. We'll have
Right.
updated results. I can pull that and send that out.
Yeah, that'd be great. It was much more comprehensive than I expected it to be. Yeah. David, do you have another question?
No, I don't have a question. I'd like to move that we accept the HR addendum.
And the HR, we need approval for the full HR actions as well.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to approve all of the HR actions, including the addendum. Okay, I think we got this. See no hands? Well, we're ready again, Anne Marie. Thank you.
Holden,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Newman,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Gullickson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes, those are approved. Okay, on to committee liaison and correspondence reports. Maybe we can let's start with Tracy tonight and we'll move that way.
Thank you, Madam President. I had the pleasure of attending the National School Boards Association Annual Conference in San Diego, California, with a few people here. It was very informative. It was a really good couple of days. In addition to the general sessions that we all attended each day, we kind of broke off and did individual sessions. So I attended non-defensive communication to increase your success, reduce conflicts, and build connections. Then I attended financing for energy, sustainability, and deferred maintenance, creating a winning board culture without losing to politics. Next, I attended using policy to promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. Seth and I actually then attended Navigating Legal Issues in Schools Related to LGBTQ plus status. This was probably the most informative one of the whole session for me. They actually ended up extending it to 2 hours because there were so many people and so many questions, but it really went through when you have conflicting state versus federal laws, how do you navigate that as a school related to those issues? And then I attended federal school law update, the First Amendment, and the new Supreme Court, which was also very, very informative. And then April 5th, we had our special board meeting. And on April 8th, I attended the Centennial Elementary Spring Carnival, and it was a total blast. Those have still remained fun over the years, so.
All I have to report is the National School Boards Association Conference, which would be my first year of in person, which I thoroughly enjoyed and learned a lot. All the breakout sessions were very well attended. Everybody was really engaged and really wanting to learn. So I definitely enjoyed myself there and learned a lot. And that is all I have. Thanks.
Before we move on, President Knudsen, since we have you on the phone, in the past, we have filled out reports for, is it national? Is that something we want to continue with?
That process hasn't continued for a couple of years for reports, for written reports.
It has not. Okay.
Correct.
I guess I haven't been in a couple of years,
So,
so that would make sense. Go ahead.
Robin?
Yes.
I guess I would just suggest that if there's anyone, and I meant to send a message out to board members that had attended, I just hadn't done that yet, but my suggestion was going to be if there are any board members that feel like there were sessions that they attended, where the information is important to the function of a committee, or it should, maybe passed on to administration to just go ahead and do that. And if there's anything that should come to governance, please send it my way.
Thank you.
And then I will just say that I do not have a report for this evening, so I will, you do not need to call on me at the end. I will listen to what everyone else has to say. Thank you and have a great night.
Thank you, Rebecca. Sorry to interrupt before you, Jennifer. Go ahead.
That's okay. Anne Maria, I have a clarifying question. We did do those reports. I missed those reports. I would support bringing those back. I think they were a great document to learn from. And also, then the public also has an opportunity to kind of see what sort of professional development we're partaking in. Wasn't it a governance decision? Maybe you could remind me. Why did we stop doing those?
Yeah, that was discussed a couple years ago, and that was just a process that the board decided to
Governance decided to end it?
do that.
It never came to us for a discussion. We just stopped doing it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So I, for one, I guess would like to see that back. That would be my vote. And maybe governance wants to put it back on the agenda. I guess maybe I'll submit that as a request. How about we do that?
Thank you.
Okay, and then in terms of share out, Rubak invited me to join the most recent employee town hall, so thank you, Rupak. And the topic was on House Bill 1388 and really the history behind it and the implementation of it moving forward. And so some of you may or may not be familiar with this, but they took kind of a deeper dive for maybe an hour, hour and a half, which I was totally loving, hearing the scientifically based evidence, research base around reading and curriculum. And so it's specific to reading curriculum content, professional development, the reports to legislative management, and really the process. So they took a they would call it a high level view, right, of kind of that history and then how they were going to bring that into their classroom and how they were going to bring that to professional development, and then the timelines of implementation and what that means and what that looks like for Fargo Public Schools and the kinds of things that then they will be obviously working and reporting to DPI as their implementation plan moves forward. And so I just appreciated being part of that process and having that opportunity to learn and really the highlight and one of the key takeaways really is, it takes us about 8 times to commit something to memory, but really in terms of practice and becoming efficient and proficient with practice, it's 20 to 30 times. And so they really talked about how does that translate into our classrooms every day, and really that it goes back to outcomes and identifying, you know, every student is really at a different level and unique need, and being able to do that. So I found it I really appreciated being there. So thank you for that.
Thank you. David?
I did not attend the national conference because a few years ago, the board decided to send people every other year as a cost-saving measure. And since this was my last year of service, those 5 of us who are up for reelection this year did not go. Thank you.
Correct. I'll cover that in my contract, or my report too. Let's see. Jim?
Since our last regular board meeting, I think we've had 2 planning meetings, a governance committee meeting, and I too attended the National School Board meeting.
Brian?
Just committee meetings and things like that, so nothing else to report.
Nikki?
Thank you. I too attended the National School Board's training. A few of us ended up in a few of the same things, but many of us also took different things. And I tried to maintain my focus on communications with stakeholders, shareholders, community, parents, and different things like that. So if they do bring the reports back, I'd be happy to do them. Went to the governance meeting, went to the special board meeting. Foundation, the Fargo FPS Foundation will meet next week, and so will CEA. So I'm looking forward to discussing things there that I picked up on at training. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of my items, I attended the first Fargo Cass Public Health Board meeting that we've had in public, so that was quite nice. Items that were covered were the usual things, presentations by Dr. Severson, Dr. Newman. There was a family planning site update and budgets, so it's kind of nice to get back to normal. I'm feeling like most everything is getting back to normal, so knock on wood. North Dakota School Boards Association sent me to part of the national conference as a delegate for the state of North Dakota, a voting delegate. So Patty Stedman and I, our costs were covered by the state association. And during that delegate assembly, we elected a new national president. We addressed different updated bylaws and constitutional amendments and resolutions for the upcoming federal session. Of note that I thought a lot of you would be interested in, I don't know if you remember the infamous letter that was sent from our state or our national organization to the president talking about protection of school board members. So some items were put into place, into language, to hopefully prevent that from happening again. So first of all, there will be an internal review on the process of approving this letter and the reason it was sent. There was some firm language included in the bylaws that include very explicitly nonpartisanship efforts were included to pretty much everything. And then we injected some importance of parental partnerships language as well. And then this was an interesting one. They now added to their bylaws, I believe, that it would be okay to remove board members for actions that were questionable. So the board could remove board members for speaking out of turn, for lack of a better term. So I think there was some movement going forward there as well. The state did also allow me to attend some of the other classes in the conference, and I went for the legislative track. So I learned a lot, and I think it's a good idea to write those down. I think I'll do that anyway, just for my notes. So Anne Marie sent out all the other upcoming things to have on our calendar. So Rupak.
Yeah, sorry for the untraditional request. I did just want to clarify one thing, just because I know we have some media partners in the room, and we have individuals that might be watching the board meeting online as well. I do just feel that it's my responsibility to kind of represent our district and our staff accurately as well. And I think there was a comment made earlier that student achievement is at an all-time low, and I just want to show that is incorrect. Our staff work tremendously hard. Our educators work incredibly hard. Our graduation rates are posted on our strategic plan dashboard dating back to 2009. If there's anything that we do know that is true, is that we're not at an all-time low. In fact, our students are coming in with more needs, which you've heard at negotiations, with more complexities than they've ever been before and coming off of pandemic. So, you know, when we make statements like that, I think it's just important to be able to verify that, because we don't want to discount the great educators that are working in our classroom every single day. And the data will just show you that that's not true, because whether it's North Dakota Insights or whether it's our strategic plan dashboard, yeah, we can look at achievements and assessments at one point in time. They change. There's a difference between proficiency and growth, but graduation rates is really what we're trying to look at as a whole. And I think it's important to be able to recognize that as well.
The next meeting is, regular meeting is April 26th. So we are adjourned. Thank you.